Today I'm out here in the San Diego Harbor at the Marquis Marriott. Going to be talking to Andrew Greer. We're going to be covering everything that you need to know to complete development deals. Let's get started. Today I'm drinking a St. Archer Blonde, and Andrew's got the ever classic Stone IPA. So cheers, let's kick this thing off.
Great way to start.
Yeah, it's a good way to start. I got the trusty yellow pad here, so we're gonna dive right in and get right to it. Why don't we start with just kind of like a 30,000 foot view on how a development deal works?
So, development is always based around obviously the land. So the most important thing when you go into a process is determining what the land is that you're investing in and looking at what's available to be done on that land. You'd go from land to ministerial approval, turning your plans and permits, to construction. So the other is going through a discretionary process, which is where you take land that maybe you could build 6 units on, and you go, hey, I want to try and get a bonus for this, an affordability bonus, a sustainability bonus. I'm going to put 10 units on it. I'm going to minimize my parking or change my parking, and I'm going to max out the build. So that goes through what's called a discretionary process. You turn in all your plans, conceptuals. That goes through a permitting and approval process. Then if it's approved, it goes to the next step, which is where the other step started. And it continues on with actually doing the, this is how we're gonna build it, ministerial review, like I'm putting a board here, I'm putting a driveway there, type process.
So in a nutshell, is the difference whether it's already zoned for more units or not?
That is the majority of the time what sets them apart. And then if you want to subdivide or not.
Got it.
So if you're building a quadplex where all the walls are attached versus 4 units that you want to separate onto 4 separate lots.
Got it. Okay, very cool. So why don't we talk about what the difference there is in terms of the setup and what they would need to know as an agent to either do this type of a deal themselves or even just be able to help find more investor clients that they could represent on deals like this.
The time difference is going to generally vary from somewhere to like 12 to 18 months longer if you're doing discretionary.
Okay.
So it's the process of going through, finding out what you want to do, then going to your architect, your civil engineer, your Title 24. You might need mechanical engineers, you're going to need soils engineers. You're going to do all your tests, all your studies, put all of that together and do your submittal. That process can take 3 to 6 months depending upon how involved the project is.
And how do you know all of the things that you would need? Is there like a standard operating procedure on that stuff?
Unfortunately, not really.
Okay.
City by city, there's 19 different municipalities in San Diego County alone. They all have different submittal processes. So you have to go to each city or municipality you're going to and get their checklist.
Got it.
And when you get that checklist, I generally, when I was starting out, I would ask them, hey, who's doing plans in this area? I know you can't give me a recommendation because they're the city, but can you give me 5 people I could call? Another thing I did is when I came to San Diego City, I went down, they have a plans floor, and I just pulled all the names of the guys off the plans and started calling them because I knew they were turning stuff in.
Smart. It's very resourceful.
Yeah, and that was my route for finding the right people.
Obviously, on development deals like this, you really got to be in good with the city. There are strategies that you could recommend in terms of getting things done a little quicker or maybe getting your foot in the door. Did that bird just shit on my head? Did it?
No, it did not.
No.
Oh my freaking God, that would be hysterical.
I just felt something. I was like, get the fuck out of here. That would have been so epic, though.
I'm so leaving that in. Get on my head.
Let's start with, how does someone go about finding their local office in their area?
1, go that route and ask them who they recommend. If somebody's really good, you're still going to get a glowing recommendation from somebody at the city. You're going to be able to tell. The next is you can go on in San Diego and you can see all the permits that are pulled on a regular basis. It's called OpenDSD. log in, look for the permits that are pulled, and you can literally see who the architect was, who the soils engineer was in the system. So if you are in a neighborhood and there's 5 houses that have been built, say in the last few years, go into OpenDSD, do a search for that address, pull up all the consultants that were on it. Now you have a list of people that do business in the area.
That's a really good tip.
It's the fastest way to cut through everything and get the best fruit, quite literally.
And you know the people that you're talking to are people that have done it already, which is huge, and people that know that local area, know that immediate market.
Cut through all the BS.
It's so obvious and so simple, but so genius at the same time, right? Like,
I didn't do it for the first 3 years.
Yeah, like that's the type of tip that can shortcut someone's success, like in a major way.
Oh yeah.
So OpenDSD, is that a .com or is that they just Google it and find it?
Yeah, and if you type in OpenDSD, it pops up #1 search.
Let's touch a little bit more on the actually getting to the decision maker, right? So how, like let's say I live in Oceanside, for example, so let's say I wanted to do a deal in Oceanside, I found a great property, and now I take it to the city, and what happens there? How do I get to the person that is the person I really want to talk to?
The person you want to talk to 99% of the time when you're in the conceptual phase of a project is the planning department and whoever is the head of that department for the area you're in. Planning is kind of the gatekeeper for everyone. They know the community plan. They can guide you in the direction of this is what's allowed to be built here. This is what we are building here. So you know that you're not going to run into that first level of resistance. Because then, I mean, there's still the building department. There's still the civil engineering, the engineering department, essentially. They're not going to be the people.
So let me ask you this. So is then step 1 to go to the planning department and run this idea by them before you even pass?
Yeah, that's
pass go.
#1 is doing that. So going in, finding out that it fits. That's how you find out, oh, I can put 6 on this lot. Okay. That's how you find that information out.
And what are some other good questions to ask? You know, like what sort of units are you guys looking for? Stuff like that. What
you'll ask them for their community plan. So what's their general? They might have a general plan, an exact community plan, but every planning department for the city goes in and votes in like this neighborhood's medium density, this neighborhood's high density. This neighborhood has been this for a while. We want to switch that up, so we've changed the zoning here. So if somebody comes in with a favorable product to be zoned there, you're going to get it's going to go a little bit smoother. You know, they want 6 units here. It used to only be 2. Holy cow, I can go in and buy these units and I can maximize them now. And that's what happened in Little Italy.
In that scenario, is that something that would be pretty much a slam dunk for them? Because you know it's got 2 on it. It has the potential of 6. You also know that they want more higher density stuff. So is that at that point like a green light for you?
Yeah, that's a path of least resistance. It's something that we're always looking for. If you can play to what they want and not encounter any extra resistance, because you're going to get resistance somewhere.
Right.
The more friction I can remove up front by doing what they want, the better. So, and it's definitely, it's the path we choose to go most of the time now.
Yeah. It's the help me, help you pitch.
Exactly. and you literally lay it out on the table for them that way.
What about like getting your foot in the door? What's the move there to get your foot in the door? Because obviously I imagine you can't just walk right in and talk to the head guy in charge.
No, the best way to get your foot in the door is to go the route of doing the research. So you go in, you kind of toss it out there what the idea is, they give you an idea what's there. Go do your research, come back with good questions, but in between then, you need to hook yourself up with the right architect or civil engineer that's going to help you on that inroad. They're spending a lot more time with them, and they also speak the same language. They don't speak entrepreneur, they don't speak realtor. They speak, our plan and our goal is this.
Right.
And that's what architects and even more so civil engineers speak. So getting to that influencer, I guess you would say, on your team is huge. I've inserted myself in all of our projects, so I now have a relationship with the city where people won't. The other thing I've learned, and this is actually, now that you bring it up, this has turned out amazing for me, and it was just by chance that I started doing it. I go to all of my meetings where the engineer or the architect are called in, and I sit down and I stay involved in the conversation. There's a lot of guys that just have their team do that. It puts a face to a name, and it changes the dynamic, and that was just the way I was doing it.
All right, cool. So that's kind of the overarching strategy. But what about in terms of just the actual process of getting the permit? What does that take us through that?
You go through a process where you turn in the construction docs, and they go into what's called review cycles. So you turn in all your sets of plans. They get routed to all the different departments, and this is something that I didn't understand until I did it. But we came in last week. We gave them 12 sets of docs for our project. It was like $1,300 in printing. Full-size plans, every single thing, studies, reports, all that information. You work with your consultants, obviously, to generate it. Turn that in. It gets routed to all those departments. They have 30 days to respond, and then you get back a letter with all the questions about your plans on it. Everything that's redlined, everything that comes back. What happens after that is you get your comments back from all of those departments, and it's really overwhelming the first time. So my first set of comments on a development, and this was a small lot subdivision, was 48 pages. And it's bullet points of everything they want you to answer.
Wow.
And it's
48 pages.
48 pages about
How common is that?
It's relatively common.
Okay.
Because there's lots of requests mixed in there. At the same time, there's changes, and then there's what they call significant issues or information. So they write you a 6-page letter basically at the beginning, kind of summarizing all the issues. But then your issue could be as simple as need to see door frame height, or it could be significant issue, historical, significant issue, you have issues with your drainage. And then you have to go through and go back through that process and start going over it and get them back in.
And so from the time you've submitted to the time that you get all that conditional stuff back and questions back, what is that timeline?
It's 30 to 35 days usually.
30 to 35 days. And then from there, how long do they give you to get them all the information they need?
You have basically as long as you need. I mean, we've gotten stuck in a cycle once where it took us 4.5 months.
But the ball stops moving until you provide everything.
Yeah, so you provide everything, and this is what throws everybody off. Then they come back with more questions. And it's going to be 20 pages at that point. You go through, you answer all those questions, then you go back in, then they can come back with more questions. There's no certain number of reviews that you will go through. You just go through reviews until you've answered all their questions. And it's kind of it doesn't follow a logical path. What would you say is like the
average amount of back and forths?
3 to 4 on a standard project.
3 to 4 back and forths.
Yeah.
And that generally takes about how long?
Takes about a year.
Takes about a year.
Yeah, so that whole process can take 12 months, maybe 18 months, because you have those cycles where it's in for review. Then you get it back and you have to go through all your consultants and get everyone lined up and get it all back in again. So you could spend 2 months answering all the questions before you go back in. Mm-hmm. As it gets to the end and the comments become fewer and fewer and fewer, it goes a lot quicker. But early on, you could have some major design questions, major layout questions that you have to answer that affect the rest of the project.
And how does that process work exactly? Is that all emailed back and forth? Are you going back for meetings and representing?
So if you have what you consider like a significant issue where there's a conflict, like we have one where we're building a handicap ramp off the side of our property. Logistically, we can't build it in a safe way. And we presented it to the city several times, and then we told them, we have no problem building this. You have to do a design variance on it, and you guys have to be fine carrying the liability on it. So the handicap ramp is 28 degrees. Mm-hmm. It's like a skateboard ramp. So but it's kind of shows you some of the process where you run into an issue and you're like, this doesn't make sense, and working with our engineers,
And then so in a situation like that, which I'd imagine is somewhat of a roadblock,
mm-hmm.
What happens then?
I request conflict resolution meetings a lot sooner, I think, than other people. If we're going back and forth over email and I don't see the tone of the conversation changing appropriately,
Yeah.
I just get everybody in a room.
Let's talk about the things you need to get a permit. What are the things that you submit? Who's on the team? Who's doing what?
Yeah. So
Okay, so you've got your team together, and then what does like the package look like that you're presenting?
So the package, I wish I had one with me. It's going to be all of their technical drawings. So when you imagine, a 24 by 36 piece of paper, it's going to show the site. It's going to show all the elevations. Elevations are looking from the north, east, south, and west. So there'll be a page of each one of those, or layered depending upon how big the project is. Then it's going to call out everything from, are we changing the curb? Where are we putting the numbers on the house? How is this house being built? All of the math for the actual structural will be in a booklet that they create just for your property. So this whole packet in total could be about 350 pages.
Wow.
And that's all put together for the majority by those 5 technical consultants that you bring in. Yeah, it is a tedious project. You'll want to get a rolly cart because you need to turn in 12 of those.
Yeah. And the 12 is for each one of the departments that needs to sign off on it?
Yeah, so it's going to go environmental, fire, planning, make it a couple sets to planning, historical, engineering, streets, transportation, everyone gets a copy. And as you go down the chain, they start falling off requesting copies because different departments have signed off that they're okay with it.
Cool. All right, so we just kind of went through the outline of the permitting process. Why don't we talk about the actual plan process and how long that takes, costs, things like that?
So actually creating the plans, you're going to work with the 5 different consultants, the architect, the civil engineer, landscape architect, and the structural engineer. Those are going to be your 4 real costs. Like Title 24 is going to come in there, but they're going to be $500 to $800. They're not going to blow the bank. They're not
breaking the bank, yeah.
Civil engineering, depending upon the complexity of the project, could be $20,000. It could go up as high as $100,000 though.
Wow.
All depends on what you're working with and how it's laid out. An architect is going to cost you somewhere in the range of 15 to 25, depending upon what the project is. If it's a single family home. If you're building out multiple homes, you could easily see a condo structure, 4 units, costing $80,000 to $90,000.
$80,000 to $90,000.
Yeah, and that's because of when you build condos, you have to carry a different type of insurance. The architect's on the hook. They want to make sure it's done. If we do condo maps, we like to get them re-reviewed and certified by an outside architect. It's a waiver for everybody to protect us.
Nice.
From any issues.
Good tip.
Yeah, and it's worth it because the amount of time it takes to respond to a lawsuit is worth as much as that one person to review it.
Just avoid it.
Just to even to respond.
Yeah. Talking about architects and plans, do you notice any of a difference between buying like pre-drawn, pre-turnkey, ready to go ones versus custom more involved plans in terms of both efficiency and what you prefer and in terms of getting it approved?
I don't do it. I refuse. Reason being, that architect is gonna be the person that works with you with the city. If it's a pre-approved, stamped kind of set plan, you don't have that person on your team. You got it from them online.
Makes sense.
And then they're just not there for you. If it's a HUD build, you can do that. But that's kind of a whole different concept. So there's approved plans for HUD housing that are approved everywhere.
Like universally approved.
Yeah, and you can use those. They're not sexy, and they're primarily for like communal housing and stuff like that, where they use HUD-approved homes.
Cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've dove into it a little bit. I haven't done one yet, but I'm considering it just because of some of those efficiencies. But it just has to meet certain criteria as what the return is going to be on the product. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's got a pencil.
Yeah.
In terms of the differences between like doing just room additions versus lot splits versus new builds.
Perfect. That's a great question. Room additions are very easy. I mean, in the scheme of things, it's ministerial. You're adding it onto the house. So you're not going through the same engineering process, the same process with the city. You just have to make sure that you're allowed to build that much square footage onto the house. Stay within the rules of the existing zone. And it's strictly this is what we're building and how we're building it kind of permit.
Okay. And I'd imagine that's a lot shorter.
A lot.
How does zoning play into this, and what are some strategies you have in terms of zoning challenges?
Yeah, so zoning and planning together, a lot of times the way people think of zoning is more along the lines of what planning is. And that's where it comes into, like, a lot of people think, oh, the zoning for this area is X, Y, Z. Well, it's actually what planning is put together in their community plan created that zone. For zoning challenges, going through and trying to fix an issue or get different zoning, anytime you're trying to do that, it's discretionary. That's what you're requesting. You're saying, hey, I need the city to take its discretion and tell me if I can change this. The best way to get that done is to go out and do a study of the neighborhood, and you can do this with your eyes and a notepad. I want to put this here. I'm going to go look around me and see if there's any of those around me. And if they are, I'm going to note all of their locations. Then I'm going to go pull their zoning. If everybody else is a single family and I really think a 10-story tall hotel is going to work well, it's not going to fly.
Yeah.
But if there's 4 other 10-story hotels, maybe it's going to fly.
You probably got a shot.
Yeah.
What about easements and setbacks?
So setbacks, super easy to find. You can go in to OpenDSD or pull the Muni code, and it'll tell you based on what your address is, what zoning you have.
And setbacks, just for those that don't know, is just basically how far away the property can build from the lot lines.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you'll notice when you look down streets, all the houses kind of sit on the same line. And then when you walk down them, you'll notice they're all kind of the same distance from the fences in most areas. Those are your setbacks.
Same distance apart from one another.
Yeah, and easements usually come up nowadays for driveways. That's the #1 thing that comes up for easements.
So when you say that, would you mean like 2 houses on one lot that share a way in?
Yeah.
long story short, know the easements.
Yeah.
Take a good long hard look at them, and if it doesn't make sense, just move on.
Yep. Yeah. Or start buying every house around it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other option. Earlier on, you also mentioned bonuses. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by bonuses.
Yeah, so you can get affordability bonuses in the state of California. One bonus is that you can intensify the density of a property by 1.5 times if you give an affordability bonus. That might be 5% low income or 10% very low income. And there's a bonus scale based on how many units you give on what you can do. One of the biggest bonuses being used right now is removal of parking spots. So a 2-bedroom apartment has to have 2 parking spots. If you have affordable units, you can reduce it to 1. So, and there's even scenarios where you can reduce it to half. So,
what is a half parking spot?
It means that 2 units have 1 spot.
Wow.
Literally.
It's like a shared spot.
Yeah, or I have 12 units and my building has 6 parking spots. So you got to figure out how that works. The next is autonomous cars are going to change how that works. The value of a parking spot is going to diminish, and I think that going that direction now is going to be a real win for people. Obviously it's a bet, but I just don't see people having cars.
That's some big time foresight.
Yeah, I see no reason for it. And I also think that having the ability to rent out spots to autonomous cars where they can charge or be serviced is going to be another play. So
there you go. That's some hyper advanced stuff right there. So I just want to wrap up with one question that I like to ask people, and that's really like, what's one thing that you wish you knew when you started your first development deal?
I wish I had gone the route of paying a little bit more for hyper-local vendors instead of saving a couple bucks for not being hyper-local. Hyper-local is incredibly important. Right now I work with different consultants on different projects, even though they're all going at the same time, just because they're in different parts of town. And that has been the best relief of stress and pressure on us, because they just know the answers in that building department.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, because really those hyper-local people, they know the market, they know the city, they know the people, they know the zoning, they know what works, what doesn't, they know the community plans, and that's just a great way to kind of reposition yourself ahead of the game.
Yep. Yeah.
So, great piece of advice. Had a really good time chatting with you today. I think there's a lot of really incredibly valuable pieces of information there. If you have any more questions for Andrew or want any more information, they can find you at Better Tomorrow Group and howtofliphousesonline.com. And if you'd like, share the video, leave us a comment, tell us what you thought, you loved it, you hated it, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Now you're in the know.